Good morning. How's everybody doing today? Yeah. Well, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Pensacola, UUCP. My name is Ian Briggs. My pronouns are he and him, and I'll be your service leader for today. No matter if you are a first-time visitor or a returning member, no matter if you're here in person or watching later online, we'd like to thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your busy schedule to join us in fellowship. This church is built on love, acceptance, understanding, and curiosity, among others, and that is all because of you. If it is your first time here, here's a little bit about ourselves. We are a lay-led congregation, which means that instead of a preacher or a minister or other singular person, instead everything is ran solely by the members of this church. So in practice, that means that we have different speakers every Sunday, both from near and from afar. In today's case, near. All of them sharing with us their words of wisdom, putting on a musical service, panels, Q&As, and all sorts of other activities. So that's just to say that there is something for everybody here at UUCP. So if you weren't sure about 1 week, you're like, I don't know. Come back the next week and you'll find something you like. If you would like some more information about our church, we do have pamphlets, which look like this. Maybe you got one. And that has all sorts of information about our church, the UU faith as a whole. You can also visit our website, uupensacola.org, which has all the same information and more. Also, finding a friendly face generally works pretty well. As I said many other times as a service leader, we are a pretty chatty bunch. If you ask, people will give you an answer. And what a better way to doing that by joining us for coffee and snacks after our service in our conference room. Alrighty, and before I move on to the announcements, just a friendly reminder, if you haven't already done so, I actually did it right before I started speaking, if you would silence or turn off any electronic devices, things that go beep and boop, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. Alrighty, so this is kind of rare. I came up here and looking for announcements, and I didn't have any new announcements today. So it's usually we got stacks of things, right?
I got one.
You got one?
Yeah.
What's your announcement?
I found out when my 1 year of Unitarian Church anniversary is coming up on June 28th, the fourth Sunday, around the same time as us, and it's like an award plaque certificate, and y'all can celebrate with me like a little get-together party here.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I found that out because I looked on the calendar on a piece of paper.
nice. Well, happy 1 year anniversary to you, Hollywood, and anybody else that's been here for a year. All right. Well, of the 3 existing announcements, they all do pertain to today, so I'll read them. All right. First one. Summer's here. The children's program will hold its traditional ice cream social. It's today. Kick off their summer program. So right after service at 11, it does say on the back porch. It does look a little wet and maybe rainy, so I guess we'll see, weather permitting. Regardless, there's ice cream, right? It's covered. We'll be outside. There you go. So children, youth, and their families are, of course, all welcome to join us, whether they are regulars or if it's your first time here. So, again, that's after service today. All right. Next announcement, mark your calendars. On Saturday, May 30th, which would be next Saturday, from 9 to 2, we are asking our able-bodied members, friends, and acquaintances to join us for outdoor planting, trimming, and cleanup day. You probably already have since it's a week away, might have gotten a phone call or a message asking you for your help. So yeah, this was originally earlier in the month, but we'll do it next Saturday. I think weather should be good if I saw WEAR anyway. But in addition to people power, we do need tools if you'd like to bring them with you. Trucks or a large trailer, although I think I heard someone is bringing a trailer. Anyway, to haul off branches and other yard waste. So if you need any last-minute questions about that, you can see Laura Keith King right up front here. Again, next Saturday the 30th, 9 to 2. And my one only other announcement here, just a reminder that the board has approved BECI to complete a full assessment of the damage to our roof, which you definitely have heard several times now. We've been having a leak, and we're going to get that fixed. So just a reminder that they will be, that company will be here at the church on May 26th, which would be Tuesday, 2 days from now, from 9 to 5. Therefore, the building will not be available for any other activities if you were planning on doing something during the week. So there we go. That's all I got. Again, it's so weird having such a small list of announcements, because a lot of them were already on the slide to start with, but there we go. Alrighty. All right, next we will have our chalice lighting, and I'll have Scott help me with that as I read these words from, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, Pat Ribby Lichty. Go with that. Our chalice is a reminder that in hard times, our ancestors in faith acted with courage to bring hope and safety, to bring life itself to threatened people. We light it today as a reminder of who we are called to be in a world still dangerous and despairing. With courage and faith, we bring ourselves to the work before us. Alrighty. So now just kind of get us in the mood, the vibe, if you will. I'll have our band play us some centering music, and as we sit and appreciate their songs, just being that it is Memorial Day weekend, just take a little bit of time to reflect not only on your past week and what you're going to do this new week or this whole week, holiday weekend, but think about if you had anyone in your family or know anybody that were, in the military, either veterans or still in there. Just take a time to reflect as we play some music. All right, now for our opening words. This is titled This Faith by Heidi Cottom. And also a rare time where opening words are on two sides. There we go. Let us be a faith that gathers, reaching for one another through the walls of hate others build, through the cages of ignorance and arrogance, and through the fear that burns city streets. Let us be a faith that sees a vision of a better world, more compassionate, more just, more holy, and with more love. There is a faith that binds up the broken, cauterizes battle wounds with the balm of peace, sings longer and louder than the trumpets of war. Let us be that faith too. Let us be the ones who do not tread lightly in this world, but light it up with our love, who hold up the mirror of worth and dignity, who are the sanctuary others seek. But first, let us be a faith that worships together, here, this morning, in this space, at this moment. Let us be a faith. Alrighty, I'm going to now invite the choir up and everybody to join us for our opening song. This one is a Mike and Rivka original entitled Remember Me. So we'll have lyrics on the slides on screen. That's the word I'm trying to find. But if you like to stand and join us, you are more than welcome to.
And I just want to remind everybody that this is not a performance that we're doing. All of us together are using our physical bodies and using our voices courageously to generate praiseful sound. So take courage, and if you sing out of tune, good luck.
Oh, my friends, will you remember me? Yes, my friends, we will remember you, will remember you, will remember you. How, my friends, will you remember me? We'll remember you by your words. We'll remember you by your words. We'll remember you by your works. We'll remember you by your works. Oh, my friends, will you remember me? Yes, my friends, we will remember you, will remember you, will remember you. How, my friends, will you remember me? We'll remember you by your laugh. We'll remember you by your laugh. We'll remember you by your dress. We'll remember you by your dress. Oh, my friends, will you remember me? Yes, my friends, we will remember you, will remember you, will remember you. How, my friends, will you remember me? We'll remember you for your mind. We'll remember you for your mind. And the stories you leave behind. And the stories you leave behind. Oh, my friends, will you remember me? Yes, my friends, we will remember you, will remember you, will remember you. How, my friends, will you remember me? We'll remember your garden plot. We'll remember your garden plot. We'll remember your cooking pot. We'll remember your cooking pot. We will remember you. We will remember you. We will remember you. We will remember you.
All right, if you remain standing for just another moment, we'll say our covenant together.
Okay.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Thank you, and you may be seated. Alrighty, this is the part of our service called Joys and Sorrows. This is a time for the community, that's you guys, come up, and if you have anything personal you'd like to share, you are free to do so. whether that's a joyful occasion or something maybe a little less than joyful or something in between. If you would like to share something, you can line up on either side of the sanctuary. We'll hand you your microphone and you briefly tell us your name and what's going on. And you drop a pebble into the water. And I forgot to mention, this part of the service is not recorded or broadcast in any way. It is entirely for the ears and the hearts that are in this room today. All right. And I will drop the first pebble. A pretty big pebble for all the big things going on in the world. Well, actually, Scott will drop it. Thank you, Scott. And there we go. Alrighty, I think it's now time to sing the children out to their religious education. Let's do it. Alrighty, now it's time for offertory. Being that we are a lay-led congregation, that means everything that goes into this building, our services we provide, and everything in between is entirely from your generous donations. So I'm going to invite the ushers up to pass the basket around. There's also information on screen to do it digitally. And while they're doing that, I'm going to also invite the choir up and we'll have a song. All right, let me introduce today's speaker. Today's speaker wears many hats. Among them, Scott is a veteran of the U.S. Navy, having served with the U.S. Marine Corps as a Navy corpsman, which is like a medic, but more. He is also a member of Veterans for Peace. Please help me welcome up to the podium, Scott Satterwhite.
Thanks, Ian, and thanks to the choir, the band, and especially Mike and Rivka for the great song, and Hollywood, of course. Thanks to all y'all. Yeah, you're really awesome. All right, so Memorial Day is a holiday that we mark to honor the military dead who died while in service. Usually these are combat-related deaths that we think of, but peacetime deaths were not uncommon when I was in the service. I had Marines die in training accidents, known of sailors lost at sea, killed on flight decks of an aircraft carrier. Some were murdered in domestic disputes, and way too many deaths by suicide. I also knew several service personnel who died of HIV and AIDS back in the 1990s. I want to show a few of these little pictures. These are some of the memorials we normally think of when we think of the veterans. You see a familiar name down there at the bottom? And this one. Service members who died of HIV and AIDS back in the 1990s. When we look back on Civil War or Revolutionary War people, we are quick to note that many of the deaths were not by bullet or bayonet, but by botulism, typhoid, or yellow fever. I worked in a hospital outside of Washington, D.C., and saw a lot of people die over there, often for service-connected disabilities that come back to bite them years after they wore a uniform. So I wanted to recognize those men and women who joined for a host of reasons, were drafted for reasons, but never made it back. In this talk, however, I wanted to talk about one veteran who survived 3 wars, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, only to be shot down in cold blood here in our city. That man was Lieutenant Colonel James Barrett. Way back in the previous century, in the year 1993, I was a Navy corpsman, as Ian mentioned. I was a Navy corpsman stationed with the 3rd Marine Division over in Okinawa. The unit I was with was based at the top of a mountain towards the most northern areas on the island. We were really isolated there and worked for about 10 days running this pretty intense jungle warfare training center. When it was time for a break, many of us rode down to the southern bases for a little R&R because they had a lot more amenities way down in the southern bases. Air Force, if you don't know, have it pretty lucky in the military. They had really nice bases down there. The drive was about an hour and a half, if I remember right. And we'd pack into the somewhat small Japanese van, usually with Armed Forces radio playing. If you've never listened to Armed Forces radio, what it's like is kind of like a mixtape of every station on the radio. Classic rock, rap, country, pop, or whatever else is popular at the time, with military history and special announcements, along with the news being played in between songs. I'm not sure why this one event stuck out to me, but I remember being on the ride down south one day in Okinawa when the top story on the news was about Pensacola. A doctor who performed abortions was murdered in the city. I knew of Pensacola, but only from its relation to the Navy base in my hometown of Corpus Christi, Texas. I also used to watch this fundamentalist preacher who did this show called Chalk Talk on Sunday mornings. He is a fire and brimstone kind of preacher who often said pretty racist and homophobic stuff while sketching these scenes from the Bible. But that was all that was on Sunday mornings in Corpus Christi. At the end of the broadcast, you'd see that his church was in Pensacola, Florida. Before I was stationed here in 1995, those 3 things were all I knew of the city. There was a naval air station, there were racist and homophobic preachers that lived here, and abortion doctors got shot over here. That was 1993. The murder of Dr. David Gunn, who was assassinated by an anti-abortion terrorist, happened here in Pensacola, outside of the Ladies Center, a women's clinic that performed legal abortions. Also, as a side note, I wanted to mention that the terms that I'm using to describe the two sides, and I should say that there's always more than two sides to everything, but we'll just go to the two sides just for this talk. For the two sides in this talk, I'm going to talk about pro-choice and anti-abortion. When I wrote an article about this congregation's struggle during the so-called abortion battles, my editor asked me why I used the term anti-abortion instead of pro-life movement. I told them the reason I did this was twofold. One, the terms accurately describe both sides in a way that they would both probably say that they were themselves. Not every person who is pro-choice is pro-abortion, but they are in favor of a woman being able to choose how to handle a pregnancy. Conversely, someone on the other side might describe their movement as pro-life, but it's really hard to write an article describing terrorist bombings and 2 assassins as pro-life. However, I think the so-called pro-life side would also agree that they are anti-abortion. Therefore, the terms fit. The second reason is a little more simple. Associated Press Style Guide says to use these terms. Apparently my editor didn't know that. I'm only a part-time pseudo-journalist, so I try to follow the rules whenever I can. Anyway, you're probably used to hearing people say pro-choice, but less so with anti-abortion. Whatever people in this movement want to call themselves is totally fine, and they're right, but it definitely sounds weird to talk about 2 men who murdered 3 people and call them pro-life. So that's that. Sadly, Dr. Gunn's assassination in 1993 was not the first nor the last work of Christian anti-abortion terrorism in Pensacola. In 1984, 4 people were arrested for the bombing of the same clinic on Christmas Day, infamously as a gift for the baby Jesus. There was also another bombing previous to that as well, so it wasn't even the only one in that year of 1984. Luckily, no one was killed in that bombing. Despite how traumatizing this was for many Pensacolans and those in the pro-choice movement, not to mention people who are seeking legal health care, the violent anti-abortion movement only gained steam in the years to follow. Led by a few self-appointed spiritual leaders, including a Vietnam veteran, former Marine, and member of the Ku Klux Klan named John Burt, continued to verbally and physically harass women attaining legal health care. Another zealot was an ordained Presbyterian minister who was later excommunicated from that denomination for his affiliation with terrorist organizations such as the right-wing fundamentalist Army of God. His name was Paul Hill. Born in Miami, Paul Hill was a reformed drug addict who had a conversion experience in prison and later studied Christian Reconstructionism, a theology seen as leading the way to what we now call Christian nationalism. Hill, along with other anti-abortion Christians, stood outside the clinic, sometimes with loud speakers, preaching, playing the voice of children and babies crying, always with gruesome images of aborted fetuses. Mostly led by men, these same people created an elaborate intelligence network that gained the addresses, phone numbers, vehicle information, and general whereabouts of Dr. Britton. Information was placed on an unwanted, quote-unquote, unwanted poster. Unwanted poster that was distributed in front of the clinic before his assassination in 1994. And this is, remember, before the internet was really a thing. It existed, but it wasn't really a thing. So it's not the easiest thing in the world to track people down, find their phone numbers and all that kind of stuff. But they did a good job of that, for better or worse. Meanwhile, members of this very congregation, including, I'll just go back to them, June Barrett, who's on your left, and Jim Barrett up here. The Universalists of Pensacola, the congregation Universalists of Pensacola, played a major role in the nonviolent means to protect these women who were using their rights to accessible health care. I know some of you were there. I don't know if you mind raising your hands. After the service, y'all should really give them a thanks for this. This is an incredible service that they provided to a lot of people at very great risk to their lives. So I know some of you were there, but this is what if you weren't there, this is what the scene looked like from the best of my reconstruction. The Lady Center was near the eastern corner of 9th Avenue in Creighton, a block down from where the CVS drugstore is now. On both sides of the street, anti-abortion protesters stood trying to intimidate the women who were there in the morning. When the women would ride up, a clearly marked clinic escort would meet the women, explain to them who they were and how they were going to help them get across the street over to the clinic safely. Nonviolent warriors, it always seems weird to use those terms together, but I think it's apt. These nonviolent warriors, if you want to use this term, would be a good way to describe these escorts. The clinic escorts braved threats being yelled at them as they helped these women cross the street. While the 1984 clinic bombing was almost a decade in the past, this wasn't a long time in the prolonged battle. The personal threats against the healthcare practitioners in particular were increasing with heavy overtones of violence. Then Dr. Gunn was shot to death in front of the clinic. Before the 1993 assassination, tensions were still very high. After the assassination, the stakes became clear. Pensacola was now the center of a battle for women's rights, the women's rights to choose. Despite the murder of Dr. Gunn, which incidentally pushed the grunge rock band Pearl Jam to start their 1994 world tour in Pensacola, if you didn't know that, where they donated the proceeds from the concert to Dr. Gunn's family, and Dr. Gunn's family came on stage and spoke. While the Rock for Choice, also the band L7, which is really good if you want to check them out. While the Rock for Choice concert was a huge success, more tragedy would come. A decade later, I volunteered to become a clinic escort. I don't want to take too much credit for this because I only did it a few times. But people in this room right now showed up countless times, countless mornings, literally risked their lives to protect these women, all of them practitioners of nonviolence. To understand where the radical anti-abortion side came to their ideas to move past nonviolence, one must see that in their eyes, murdering one person to stop abortions was justified because they viewed abortion itself as murder. To them, murder was justified to stop these doctors, as well as anyone who aided and abetted their work. This is where Lieutenant Colonel James Barrett enters the story. Jim Barrett was originally from Annapolis, Maryland. When he was younger, he earned a pilot's license when he was a teenager. Shortly before World War II began, he made the choice to join the U.S. Army Air Corps, where he was commissioned as an officer. During the war, he served as a navigator, saw combat in the skies, and earned the Bronze Star, one of the most prestigious medals in the military that was only given out for extreme heroism and meritorious achievements during combat. After the war, the Army Air Corps became the U.S. Air Force. Jim Barrett decided to stay in the military and served in 2 more wars, Korea and Vietnam. One of his last duties was as the military attaché to the U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia during the 1967 Arab-Israeli War. He retired from the Air Force 2 years later, and at that point, a heavily decorated veteran of 3 wars now, ready to retire from the military. He served for 30 years when he retired in '69. After retirement, Barrett went back to school and earned a teaching certificate from Southwestern State University, and then Southwestern Texas State University. Got to give some shout outs to my home state. He then spent over a decade teaching middle school math and science, which is probably a war in itself, a little battle. So shout out to all the middle school teachers out there. So in the coming years, Jim lost his first wife, Dorothy. During the 1980s, Jim met the woman who would become his second wife, June, who is featured in this picture. June, a widow herself, and retired officer from the Public Health Service, a captain. So he married up as she actually outranked him. She spent most of her career working on Native American reservations. June also had a son who was gay and living with HIV/AIDS. The retired couple spent their time in service to the community in many ways, including volunteering with Escambia AIDS Services, known as EASE. EASE did incredible work in the community back then and were driven, dedicated people at a time when HIV/AIDS was seen as a death sentence for most and still heavily stigmatized. Not like it's not today, but in those days it was really tough. I remember going to a few trainings with EASE to be a counselor back in the 90s and just being in awe of what they were doing, but also the magnitude, also intimidated personally by the magnitude of the work that they were doing. June and Jim knew personally how important this work was, however, and did the hard work. They also worked with another organization called Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, known as PFLAG, which we just saw an announcement for. I understand they're starting up again, as we just saw. Good timing. Sadly, June's son died of the disease in 1993, the year before Jim was assassinated. Outside of social causes, Jim was also very social. An active member of the Retired Officers Association, he was planning to have his 75th birthday party at the Mustin Beach Officers Club on the Naval Air Station. Unfortunately, Jim wouldn't live to celebrate this birthday. A former clinic escort, Julius Wernicke, told the media he got through 30 years of military service only to be shot down by a Christian. A lot of people in this room, elders in this community, were clinic escorts. Again, they may brush off this work as if it were nothing, but this was hardly the case. Even before the assassination, they knew the violent rhetoric of the anti-abortion side, and many of these escorts may also have had divergent positions on abortion, but they all agreed that women shouldn't be prevented from seeking legal health care, which included legal abortions. And they were willing to put their lives on the line for these women and families. One of the roles of the clinic escort was to help these patients cross the street, as I mentioned earlier, to get to the ladies' center without being intimidated, harassed, or physically assaulted. Another role was what Jim and June Barrett did on July 29th, 1994. Since the assassination of Dr. Gunn the year before, the doctor, in this instance, Dr. Britton, the one who is featured in that unwanted poster, took over the practice and understood the risks involved. He could not live in Pensacola because of this. The wanted pictures of Dr. Britton were heavily circulated within the circles, which included his phone number and address, so he was under constant threat at home and obviously here. On Friday mornings, the doctor would fly into Pensacola Airport and would be picked up by a volunteer escort. That morning, the volunteers were Jim and June Barrett. Both were very active in this congregation, thought very highly of here at Pensacola Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, that's what it's called back then. But also, they were thought very highly by most people who knew them. His neighbors described Jim as someone who had stopped what he was doing to help someone in need, whether it be a neighbor who he saw who needed help cutting down a tree, or a friend who he realized needed a good stiff drink. Supposedly, Jim could really make a good drink. Tom Botsford, who was president of the congregation at the time, described June as feisty in the newspaper, and Jim as someone who wouldn't hesitate to tell you what he thought. Both were also described by Tom as active Unitarians here in this congregation nearly every week, and just so giving of themselves. According to all accounts that I've heard or read, Jim and June were inseparable, even taking a long road trip through the state of Texas in their pickup truck. It was that same pickup truck that Jim and June picked up Dr. Barrett from Pensacola Airport and drove him to the ladies' clinic. If you don't know, this is what happened. Colonel Barrett was driving with Dr. Britton in the passenger side and June Barrett in the back seat. The night before, Bill Kaplinger, one of the lead organizers with the escorts, spoke with Jim. A military man, actually both. Bill was in the Air Force as well. A military man, Jim had a gun and considered carrying it for his protection. He had told Julius Wernicke, the clinic escort I mentioned earlier, that he wasn't a violent man, but if they, meaning the anti-abortion side, wanted violence, then they get it. Bill urged him, however, for the safety of the other escorts, not to bring the gun and to leave it at home. The rationale was simple. If the police saw a shootout, they would know who was on what side, and everyone would be at risk. Not only that, but not only for those reasons, but also carrying a weapon for self-defense is not necessarily in opposition to the principles of nonviolence, but it's pretty close to it. And the clinic escorts had agreed that nonviolence would be how they handled themselves. Jim agreed with Bill on this one and left the gun at home. As Jim, June, and Dr. Barrett were driving up to the clinic, they approached Dr. Britton. As they approached the clinic early that July morning, pulling into the parking lot of the Lady Center, a man with a shotgun, Jim Paul, the Christian preacher and soon-to-be assassin, stood in their way. The pickup truck slowed down, and the assassin started shooting his shotgun into the front of the truck. Dr. Britton tried to hide, but was shot and killed. June Barrett also hid in the back of the truck. She was injured, but survived. Lieutenant Colonel James Barrett, who survived 3 wars, however, was not so lucky and was killed right away. Killed in action right here in Pensacola. As you can imagine, the city was in shock, especially this congregation. Shortly afterwards, Bill Kaplinger went to visit June in the hospital. When I talked to Bill about the shooting for the article that I wrote a few years back, my first question to Bill was the obvious. What did June say? Bill said that June was very gracious to Bill because she knew he had a lot on his heart and a lot on his head at this moment. Because she knew that the two had talked about not carrying a weapon the night before. She immediately put Bill at ease about the decision by telling him that the last thing she would have wanted was for Jim's last moments to be spent digging in the glove compartment looking for a gun that probably wouldn't have helped him anyway. June lived for over a decade later. Both of their names are on the wall of remembrance right outside. If you didn't know, the piano that Jimmy was playing earlier was dedicated to Jim's memory. There's a little placard on the side over there. Jim is remembered here as a hero and martyr in the long struggle for reproductive rights. The killer of Jim Barrett and Dr. Britton is not remembered that way here, at least here. The assassin was caught immediately afterwards, tried for murder, and sentenced to death. He was executed in 2003. I personally was at a very small protest led by the ACLU standing in opposition to the death penalty in MLK Plaza. Not for what he stood for, but against the death penalty. Interestingly, that was also the same plaza where a nonviolent march ended less than a decade before, in 1994, following the interdenominational funeral, a nonviolent march for Dr. Britton and Colonel Barrett. Following the assassinations, the role that this congregation played to bring peace in this community cannot be understated. In the study of rhetoric, which is one of my jobs, there is this thing called stasis theory, which is a means of making a rhetorical argument. To get to a point of stasis with the other side, and for an argument there always has to be another side, you don't have to find a place where you agree, but a place where you agree on the problem. Neither side would be converted easily to one viewpoint or another. This doesn't happen very rarely, but it doesn't happen easily either. And if it does happen, it's usually over years, not over just a few conversations. While the anti-abortion side wasn't going to turn pro-choice because they regretted that one of the murderers was on their side, few of the murderers were on their side. However, what each side could use as a stasis point was that neither wanted to see open warfare on the streets of Pensacola. This is where the talks began. This is where people worked together. Minds may or may not have been changed concerning viewpoints on abortion, but both sides worked to prevent physical violence. Whether you agreed with this approach or not, and it definitely was controversial on both sides, no other doctors were assassinated, and no other clinic escorts were murdered by terrorists on the streets of Pensacola since then. I wanted to talk about this because I know this congregation has gone through a lot over the past few months. A lot of hurt feelings, pain, heartache, and all sorts of things. The pain is only exacerbated by the events, by outside events, a corruption that seems so hard to penetrate sometimes, taking place in our county, region, and certainly the nation. There is a feeling of hopelessness, especially when it comes to the democracy itself. It would be a whole other talk to discuss all the things that Unitarian Universalists struggled with during the Civil Rights Movement, were active in these struggles, including people here in this congregation. And to see these gains wiped away by recent decisions in the Supreme Court is clearly devastating. Not to mention the wars and threats of wars that are constantly going on and maybe even increasing, especially as we mark this Memorial Day weekend. All of this plays a role in how we interpret the events of the world and the events in our community. Thinking of this event, the murder of Colonel Barrett, if one were to point to a low point in our community, this would certainly be one of the lowest points that I could objectively state this congregation has gone through. I mentioned this to Paula Montgomery, who also played a key role in these struggles and is still involved in these fights for social justice and democracy today. I'd be surprised if Paula doesn't have a meeting right after we walk out of here for another organization that she's working with too. So very active. And she told me that what helped most back then was that the congregation came together in troubled times. The Unitarian Universalists of Pensacola had a congregant whose name may be forgotten by many, but probably a lot of you know him, Bo Davison. And feel he should be remembered. He's also on the wall back there, memorial wall. If you knew him, he walked with some trouble and supposedly was often in pain. It was because he got the hell beat out of him during the civil rights struggle. Bones broken, if I remember right. But he'd often come up here, get the microphone, and did this up until he died, and say this phrase that some of you might know. It's a great day to be a Unitarian Universalist. And the way I was talking with Lauren, my partner, about this earlier, and the way we were talking about this and what it means is maybe not that every day is a great day to be a Unitarian, but what it means is, where else would you rather be? Like, where of all the different groups and congregations and folks around, like, where are your people? You know, and this is, I believe, and Lauren, mentioned this, and I take from Lauren here, give her the credit, that this is really the foundation of that phrase. So while we remember the dead this weekend, Memorial Day, people who served in the military who died, let's also especially think of one of our own, Lieutenant Colonel James Barrett, and remember what he and all the others fought for, and keep fighting like hell for the living. Thank you. I should have wrote notes in there, but this is one of the pictures I wanted to show. This is the aftermath. If you don't, in the aftermath, there was a real healing that came together as part of this, but you might recognize the guy with the suspenders. That's Bill Kaplinger right there. And this is Lieutenant Colonel Barrett being laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery. That's his daughter.
Thank you, Scott. All right, I'm going to invite the choir up. There we go. Invite the choir up and everyone else to stand if you're willing and able to for our closing hymn, number 95 in our gray book. There is more love somewhere.
You guys are doing a great job of singing today. Thank you for that. You barely even need the book for this one. There is more love somewhere. There's more love somewhere. Keep on till I find it. There's more love somewhere. Joy and peace and justice.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere.
Joy.
There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy somewhere. There is justice somewhere. There is justice somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is justice somewhere.
All righty. There we go. Now for our closing words by Kendall L.R. Gibbons. There is finally only one thing required of us, that is to take life whole, the sunlight and shadows together, to live the life that is given us with courage and humor and truth. We have such a little moment out of the vastness of time for all our wondering and loving. Therefore, let there be no half-heartedness. Rather, let the soul be ardent in its pain, in its yearning, in its praise. Then shall peace enfold our days, and glory shall not fade from our lives. Thank you, and go in peace. Ashe.